Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're back here today with another edition of Against the Odds. So last week on our Against the Odds poll, it looked like Inverter of Truth was going to be the winner. It jumped out to a huge lead, but then overnight, between when the poll went up and the next morning, Remorseless Punishment made a huge comeback and actually ended up winning fairly easily. So we are playing Remorseless Punishment in Standard this week, and Remorseless Punishment is a really challenging card to build around. So Remorseless Punishment, 5 mana black sorcery, target opponent loses 5 life unless they discard 2 cards or sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. Repeat this process once. So basically you do it twice. The part of Remorseless Punishment that makes it really hard to build around is that it gives our opponent this choice. The issue is, for example, when our opponent's at 20 life and we really want them to discard cards or sack some creatures, they're just going to take 10 damage because they don't really care. When our opponent is at 10 life, they are going to sack some creatures or discard some cards, so Remorseless Punishment doesn't kill them. So it's really hard to break the symmetry of Remorseless Punishment, but basically the idea I came to is we need to take away our opponent's choice, which means we need to kill their creatures so they can't choose to sacrifice a creature, and we also need to make them discard their cards so they can't choose to discard cards, because if we can get them down to less than 2 cards in their hand and no creatures on the battlefield, then they don't have a choice. They have to take 10 damage from Remorseless Punishment, and 10 damage for 5 mana is actually a really insane deal. So how do we go about taking away our opponent's choice? Well, first off, we have a ton of discard. We have 4 copies of Despise. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a creature or planeswalker. The player discards it. 2, Transgress the Mind. 1 in a black, a Devoid sorcery. So no color, technically, even though it costs black mana. Target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a card with converted mana cost 3 or greater and exile that card. 4 Mind Rots, classic. 2 in a black, target player discards 2 cards, and 1 Rakshas's Secret, which is basically another Mind Rot, except we have to mill 2 cards from our library to our graveyard when we cast it. Our deck doesn't really have any way of abusing the graveyard, so the milling doesn't really benefit us like it would in some decks, so it's basically just another Mind Rot in our deck. So altogether, 11 discard spells. The goal of those spells is to get our opponent empty-handed, so when we cast our Remorseless Punishment, they can't say, okay, I'll just discard a couple cards. If they're empty-handed, they don't have that option, so that leaves them with either sacking creatures or planeswalkers, or taking the damage. So next step, once we get them empty-handed, we got to make sure their board is empty. So we also have a ton of removal. 4 Silk Wraps, exiles a creature with converted mana cost 3 or less until Silk Wrap leaves the battlefield. An ultimate price, 1 in a black, instant destroy target monocolored creature. Not a great spell in this format because there's a lot of devoid and colorless creatures and also a lot of multicolored creatures, but there are a few things that it hits. 3 Utter Ends, exile target non-land permanent. This one is sweet because not only does it kill a creature, but it also can exile a planeswalker, which, remember, is one of the options on Remorseless Punishment. Our opponent could sack a planeswalker instead of taking the damage. And then a single Quarantine Field. 4 mana, basically. Well, that's a little deceptive. 2 white and 2 X. So for 4 mana, we get to exile a permanent, a non-land permanent. But if we pay 6 mana, we can exile 2 non-land permanents, 8 mana, 3 non-land permanents. So it's kind of like this super Oblivion Ring. A little more expensive on the front end, but if you can cast it for like 6 or 8 mana, it gets really insane because you can exile a lot of things with only 1 card. So get our opponent empty-handed with the discard. Make sure we keep their board clean with the removal. Of course, we also have some spells that can clean up the whole board at once. I was really worried, like, with the goal being to get our opponent's board clean, something that really would ruin our Remorseless Punishment plan would be Hordeling Outburst, or other things that can continually make tokens, because then our Remorseless Punishment is basically make your opponent sacrifice 2/3 of a Hordeling Outburst, and that's the whole effect of the card. So Languish and Crux of Fate are basically wraths that we can use to clean up a bunch of creatures at once, get our opponent's board clean, and improve the odds of us actually dealing damage with Remorseless Punishment. Then 4 Read the Bones, just to draw a spell. Since we're only 2 colors, it's better than Painful Truce in our deck. So we get to scry 2, then draw 2, and lose 2 life. And then 2 Obnixilis, just a good value card. It really does everything our deck wants. For one thing, it draws cards. We can +1 it to draw a card and lose a life. We can -3 it to destroy a creature, so it helps keep the board clean. And then it has an ultimate, which target opponent gets an emblem, where whenever anyone draws a card, the opponent loses 2 life. And it also, with Obnixilis, it is actually, I didn't realize this, I'm not a huge flavor person, but Obnixilis is actually part of the story of the card Remorseless Punishment. The card represents him entrapping Nissa and Gideon and Jace, the other planeswalkers from the Oath of the Gatewatch. So he entrapped them, and that's what Remorseless Punishment is showing, is Obnixilis getting his revenge on the other planeswalkers. So it felt wrong not to play Obnixilis in the deck, but like I was saying, it's actually a really good card in the deck too. And of course, mana base, 4 Scoured Barrens, 4 Caves of Quelos, and 4 Shambling Vents. Black-white duels. Shambling Vents is actually really good in our deck because we don't really have creatures, so it's a way we can block something. It's a way we can gain some life to get back life that we lose to our card-drawing spells, or Obnixilis, and our Read the Bones. So it's pretty key to the deck. Then we have 4 Blighted Fens, a removal spell that is also a land. You can pay 4 and a black and stack Blighted Fen to make target opponent sacrifice a creature. So it's pretty sweet, a low opportunity cost removal spell. And then 6 swamps and 3 plains. So that's the main deck. Plan being, just to rehash it one more time, to not give our opponent a choice with Remorseless Punishment. We make them discard their cards with our ample removal or discard spells. Then we make sure their board is clean with our ample removal and rest spells. We use our draw spells to find our Remorseless Punishments and more answers. And then that makes our Remorseless Punishment deal 10 damage. And conveniently, 2 Remorseless Punishments equal 20 damage, which equals a player's starting life total. So, in theory, if we can get the board clean and the hand clean, we can take and resolve 2 Remorseless Punishments and win the game really quickly. Sideboard-wise, 4 Duress lets us customize our discard. Some decks, Despise isn't very good, and Duress is just way better, so we can switch them in and out. 2 Hallowed Moonlights to fight against Rally. Rally is kind of a hard matchup because they don't really mind creatures going to their graveyard, so we're kind of helping them by making them discard creatures, or at least not hurting them very much. So Hallowed Moonlight is an answer to that. 2 Stasis Snares, has Flash, can exile a creature. This is mostly to be an instant speed removal spell, which a lot of our other removal spells are lacking. Ultimate Price is instant speed, but like I was saying, doesn't hit that much. Utter End is instant speed, a little more expensive, but this is a way to answer a animated Gideon, a Kolaghan Stormfury, those type of cards. 3 Infinite Obliteration, mostly for the Eldrazi match, actually exclusively for the Eldrazi match. We're not going to bring these in to hit random cards, but we will bring them in to get rid of Ulamogs and World Breakers from Eldrazi, which we don't win that fast, so eventually they will draw enough lands to cast those spells and beat us. 2 Virulent Plagues. This one's actually really good for our deck. As I was saying, Hordling Outburst, those type of cards are really problematic with our Remorseless Punishment plan, but Virulent Plague is a permanent way to take care of that. It just sits out there and makes sure that tokens aren't going to ruin our day. And then another Languish for if we need more Wraths, and another Utter End is more instant speed removal. So that's the deck. As you can see, this is one of the most budget against the odds. It might be the most budget against the odds we've ever had. Only 81 bucks in paper, 50 ticks. And I didn't set out to build a budget deck. I set out to build, well, like I was saying, a deck that would make our opponent discard their hand and make sure no creatures remain on the battlefield. And it just happened to turn out to be budget. So I think it's pretty sweet. I don't know how successful it will be. There are definitely some big problems playing so much discard. Get in positions where once our opponent's hand is empty, we're drawing a lot of dead cards. Our removal, they don't print unconditional removal that is cheap anymore, so we have a lot of removal that we need to mix and match and hope to hit the right things at the right time. And Remorseless Punishment is just so swingy. Like, there are times when we will cast it on turn 5 and cast another one on turn 6 and win the game. And there are also times where we'll cast it and get 2 Hordling Outburst tokens, and it does basically nothing for 5 mana. So it's really swingy. But I don't know. I think it's going to be fun. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out. I'm going to predict about 25% game win percentage, so like about 1 out of every 4 games. I don't know if we'll actually be able to win a match with it or not. we do have a ton of removal, which is good. Like, we can just kill a lot of things, but we don't have a good way of closing out the game without either using our Remorseless Punishment, which, as I was saying, can be tricky, or Ob Nixilis Ultimate, and I guess plan D being Shambling Fence Beatdown. So we'll see. Regardless, I think it'll be sweet, and it should be fun. Make sure to check out the website, mtggoldfish.com. It's where you will find the article for this Against the Odds, the poll for next week's Against the Odds, decks, prices, metagame strategy, pretty much anything and everything you could want related to Magic the Gathering. And if you enjoyed the Remorseless Punishment videos, make sure to click the subscribe button that's going to pop up on the bottom of your screen. Anyway, I hope you enjoy them. I think it should be fun. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon.